I want you to just look at your own hands for a second.
Right.
Really think about the the invisible weight you carry around every single day, like the stress of your job, the grief of losing a loved one, maybe the guilt over a choice you made years ago.
Yeah, the heavy stuff.
Exactly. And we always call that emotional baggage, right? Like we use the word heavy as a metaphor.
We do.
But I want you to try to imagine a reality where it isn't a metaphor at all. Picture a universe where the grief, the trauma, the love, all the specific choices of your entire life, they accumulate into a literal, measurable, physical mass.
Which is such a wild concept.
It really is. Yeah. And when you die, that mass doesn't just evaporate. It settles right into your remains. And someone actually has to use their physical body to, like, pick it up and carry it to its final resting place.
It forces a complete recalibration of how you view human existence, honestly.
Oh, absolutely.
Because a passing is no longer just, a biological cessation. It becomes a literal transfer of kinetic energy. The ending of a life is a physical transaction of everything a person was, and somebody has to bear the friction of that transaction.
And that right there is the premise of today's deep dive. We are looking at excerpts from a really incredible text called The Pallbearers Guild by Max and Claude.
Such a fantastic book.
It is. And our mission today isn't just to look at the fantasy elements of this world where pallbearing is this deeply specialized, almost mystical profession. We're going to unpack the actual mechanics of this universe.
Right, to get to the core of it.
Yes, to extract some really profound lessons about how unacknowledged history, so the stuff we bury both personally and historically, how that shapes the literal ground we walk on. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
We enter this universe through a protagonist named Micah Calloway. So Micah is a senior pallbearer with Local 7 of the Guild. He's got 11 years on the job, 147 carryings under his belt.
A veteran, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And the text makes it immediately clear that this is grueling work. Like, this isn't just 4 guys in suits lifting a wooden box with some rope.
Not at all. I mean, the Guild operates on a really strict set of biomechanical and, spiritual laws.
Right.
And the most foundational law they teach is the difference between what they call muscular enthusiasm and gravitational communion.
Which is such a great phrase. Muscular enthusiasm.
It's perfect, right? Because muscular enthusiasm is just brute force. It's the way a mover picks up a refrigerator. You grit your teeth, you flex your muscles, and you just force the object from point A to point B.
Yeah, just powering through it.
Exactly. But if a pallbearer tries to do that with a human life, the text says the weight will literally snap their spine.
Wow. Because they aren't just lifting bone and tissue, right? They are lifting a lifetime of accumulated choices.
Precisely.
So how does this gravitational communion actually work? Because the text describes it less like weightlifting and more like, I guess, somatic empathy.
That's an excellent way to phrase it, actually, because gravitational communion requires the pallbearer to completely sync their own nervous system with the specific gravity of the deceased.
Okay, so like a biofeedback loop.
Yeah, it requires total meditative attention. You don't impose your own rhythm on the passage. You let the passage dictate the rhythm.
It reminds me of, like, trying to move a really heavy couch with a friend who is totally out of sync with you. It's impossible. But this is that scaled up to a spiritual level.
That is exactly it. You let the vibration of that completed life travel through your bones, much like holding a massive tuning fork. You're entering into a shared physical relationship with the weight.
Which means the pallbearers can physically feel the data of how a person lived and died.
Yes.
And the Guild measures this using a term called residual volitional density, or sometimes they call it karmic mass. To put it simply, different deaths have entirely different densities. So, for instance, Micah talks about carrying a suicide victim. The man was physically very large, over 250 pounds, but lifting the coffin felt weightless.
Totally light.
Yeah, it felt incredibly light to the team.
And this is where the text gets into the physics of intention. The reason the suicide felt light to the pallbearers is because of authorship.
Authorship, okay.
Right, because a suicide, regardless of the tragic circumstances surrounding it, it involves a definitive choice by the individual to end their own trajectory.
So they were in control of the ending.
Exactly. That intentionality, that agency over the ending, it dissipates the residual weight. The person authored their own conclusion.
But then you look at a murder. Micah describes carrying the body of a murdered man who physically only weighed about 130 pounds.
Right. Much smaller physical mass.
Yeah, but when the team lifted the coffin, it felt like trying to deadlift a block of solid lead.
Yeah.
You could barely get it off the floor.
Because in a murder, the victim had zero authorship over their ending. Think of a life as an object moving through space with a certain momentum.
Right.
In a murder, that momentum is violently, abruptly severed by an outside force. The death was entirely imposed.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so that lack of choice, that unfinished forward motion, it creates a massive kinetic void. The dead person is still carrying the imposition of that sudden stop, which means the pallbearers have to absorb the shockwave of it for them.
That is so intense, and you see this contrast beautifully in the carrying of Arthur Fenwick.
Oh, Arthur. Yes.
Yeah, he was this elderly man who died of natural causes, surrounded by a family who deeply loved him. And the Guild's intake paperwork literally notes that Arthur leaves warm.
Leaves warm.
Yeah. When Micah's team carries him, they don't feel a crushing density. They feel this gentle, ambient warmth radiating through the wood of the casket, like sunlight hitting your skin through a window pane.
It's the physical residue of a well-mourned life.
It is. But okay, I have to stop here because this mechanic raises a huge red flag for me. Yeah, if a suicide feels one way, and a murder feels another, and a loved person feels warm, aren't these pallbearers basically operating as moral judges?
Ah.
I mean, they are literally holding the scale and weighing the quality of a human soul. That feels incredibly judgmental.
So what's fascinating here is that the authors, Max and Claude, actively anticipate that exact concern.
Oh, they do?
Yes. The text is incredibly strict about distinguishing between a judge and a reader. The pallbearers are readers.
Okay.
A judge looks at a suicide and assigns a moral verdict, right, like calling it a sin or a tragedy. A judge looks at a murder and demands justice. Micah isn't doing that. He is strictly reading the kinematics of the ending.
So it's pure physics, not ethics.
Precisely. They are measuring the literal data of intention, grief, and consequence without applying any moral lens to it.
It's just what it is.
Right. The weight is just reality. The pallbearer's job isn't to decide if a life was good or bad, but simply to acknowledge the physical reality of how it concluded so that the weight can finally be set down.
That distinction makes a lot of sense. And frankly, it's a brilliant way to explore how we process things in our own lives, you know?
How so?
Well, when something sudden and imposed happens to us, like a layoff we didn't see coming or a sudden breakup, it feels infinitely heavier to drag around than our hardship we actively chose, like going back to school or training for a marathon.
Absolutely. The lack of choice creates the weight.
Exactly. But this mechanic leads us to a massive, unresolved question. If the Guild relies on reading the conclusion of a life, what happens when a life is built on an ending that never actually happened?
And this brings us to the anomaly of Elias Voss.
Yes, Elias Voss.
So by all external metrics, Elias lived a highly successful, complete life. He was a master builder, ran a massive construction firm, married twice, had grandchildren. He died peacefully in his bed at the age of 83.
But when the Guild's assessors arrive to measure his passage, they don't feel the weight of a completed 83-year-old life.
Not at all.
They feel this violent retrograde pull.
Yeah.
Elias's remains are actively trying to drag backward in time.
Which is wild. And to understand why, we have to look at the Guild's historical records. Elias Voss wasn't just born in 1941, he was born dead.
Right.
On April 14th, 1941, at 11:52 p.m., the infant Elias was formally pronounced dead by the attending physician at a downtown hospital.
But he didn't stay dead, because the text explains that in a neighboring ward of that same hospital, a rogue spiritual practitioner named Celeste Moram was performing a highly illegal, unsanctioned ritual to save a completely different client.
Yes.
But it wasn't just like magic. The book frames it as localized reality manipulation.
Exactly. She essentially created a vacuum of entropy in her room to pause her client's decay. She paused the laws of thermodynamics in a localized space.
Wow.
And the dead Voss infant sitting in the next room got caught in the blast radius of that subversion.
Collateral damage.
Well, the Guild calls it a collateral suspension. Morone didn't resurrect the baby, she simply froze the mechanism of his dying. She held his original death in an indefinite state of abeyance.
So Elias woke up, and he went on to live an entire 83-year life tucked inside the microsecond of a paused death.
It's beautiful and terrifying.
Right. But now that his physical body has finally given out from old age, that original vacuum has collapsed. The 1941 death is unpausing, and it is demanding its conclusion.
It wants to finish.
So Micah and his team are assigned the carrying. But they can't take Elias to a cemetery. The retrograde pull is acting like a compass, pointing them to a specific parking structure on Meridian Street.
which happens to be the exact plot of land where that hospital stood in 1941.
Yeah, and they have to get him there at exactly 11:52 p.m. This part kind of broke my brain a little.
I can see why.
How do you physically carry a body to a time? I mean, a parking garage is a physical place, but 1941 is a temporal coordinate.
It really challenges our perception of geography. The text posits that places retain time. The ground remembers the imprint of major energetic events, much like geological strata or the rings of a tree.
Oh, that makes sense.
So when the pallbearers are walking to that parking structure, they aren't just navigating the X and Y axes of the city streets. Through gravitational communion, they are bracing against the temporal Z-axis.
Bracing against time itself.
Yes. They are aligning their physical bodies with the temporal timestamp that the Earth recorded at that specific location.
And what I really love is how this hidden temporal scar defined Elias's entire personality. He was a master builder who spent his life obsessed with foundations. His core philosophy was that a building is only as honest as its foundation is understood.
He felt the void.
Exactly. Subconsciously, he spent 60 years overcompensating, trying to build structurally perfect things, because his own biological foundation was profoundly unstable. He knew he was standing on a void.
And the resolution of that void is incredibly striking.
It really is.
When Micah's team finally places Elias down in that alleyway at 11:52 p.m., the text describes the two weights merging. The massive, complex weight of his 83 lived years finally catches up with the tiny, suspended weight of his infant death.
They snap together.
Yes, the two halves of his existence merge, and the conversation between his life and his death is finally over.
It's a gorgeous resolution for Elias. But it opens up a terrifying, broader implication.
Yeah.
If Elias Voss's personal life was shaped by an unfinished death he didn't even know about, what happens when it's not just one person's foundation?
Right.
What happens when an entire piece of real estate, like an entire building, is constructed over unfinished business?
And that structural question is the core of the text's climax. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we move from Elias's personal architecture to the literal architecture of the Alvarado building.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and I don't use that phrase lightly, because the scale of what the text does here completely shifted my perspective.
It's monumental.
The Alvarado building is a 6-story commercial structure built in 1921. Micah is handed this massive 412-page file on it because the Guild has been monitoring this building for over a decade. It is classified as the most residually hyperdense location in the city. Yeah. Over 11 years, this building has drawn 12 living people inside, locked them in a temporal stasis, essentially examined them, and let 11 of them go. It's behaving like a living entity.
And to understand the mechanics of this hyperdensity, we have to look at the geological survey in Micah's file.
Right.
In the 1870s, long before the concrete was poured, that plot of land was a dirt lot in a highly marginalized, unreported immigrant neighborhood.
Right.
The text details a family from Oaxaca, Mexico Domingo, and Esperanza Carrera who lived there. They had a daughter, Luisa, who was about 8 years old when she died. But because the family was poor, undocumented, and lacked access to formal city infrastructure or church graveyards, they couldn't give her a formal burial.
And remember our rule about keeping this strictly to the text. The authors are illustrating a specific mechanical consequence of this exclusion.
Yes, exactly.
The Carreras had to bury their child themselves, informally, right in the dirt lot. No public record, no communal mourning, just the raw, unacknowledged agony of two parents pressed directly into the soil.
And that untreated grief sat in the earth for 50 years. Then, in 1921, a man named Aurelio Alvarado purchases the lot.
Okay, here we go.
Aurelio is in the throes of his own catastrophic devastation. He has just lost his wife and 2 young children to the influenza pandemic in the span of a single week.
Unimaginable loss.
And he pours the concrete foundation for his new commercial building directly over Luisa Carrera's unmarked, unrecorded grave.
And the text treats this like 2 massive tectonic plates of grief colliding. You have the deep, unrecorded silence of the Carrera family meeting the fresh, agonizing sorrow of Aurelio Alvarado.
They don't just stack on top of each other, they resonate.
Yes. It's like constructive interference in audio waves, where 2 frequencies meet and amplify each other into a deafening roar. Over the next century, that structural fault line of sorrow acts as a magnet, absorbing the residual background weight of the entire city until the building reaches maximum saturation.
And importantly, the building isn't a haunted house in the traditional sense.
No, not at all.
It has no malicious intent. It isn't trying to harm people. It is desperately, violently protective.
Right.
It is holding on to the uncarried weight of Luisa Carrera, and it has been pulling living people inside for a decade, trying to find someone, anyone, who has the capacity to finally witness this uncarried child.
It's in a total structural lockdown.
Okay.
Which brings us to the 12th person the building pulls in. A 41-year-old historian named Ren Solano.
Ren.
Yeah, Ren wasn't just wandering by. He had been digging through obscure property deeds and fragmented census data, and he actually found it. He found Luisa's name. He realized what was buried under the concrete.
He did the work.
He did. So he walks into the Alvarado building to give this child her name back. But the atmospheric density of that building is so heavy, the physical strain triggers a fatal heart attack. Ren dies inside.
A tragedy on top of a tragedy.
And the building, acting almost like a mother, refuses to let him pass on. It holds his passage in stasis to keep him safe until the guild arrives.
Which creates an unprecedented logistical nightmare for Micah's team. They have to enter this saturated, hyperdense building at midnight to perform a dual carrying.
A carrying with no physical body for Luisa.
Right. She is dust under a concrete foundation. They have to execute a mandate written by James Ello, one of the guild's founders, regarding the carrying of the lost.
Okay, what does that mandate say?
It states that when physical remains are inaccessible, the pallbearer must use sustained communion with the residual presence. The attention must be its own object.
The attention must be its own object, but how do you actually do that? I'm trying to visualize Micah and his team standing in an empty, oppressive basement. How do you lift an idea?
The text describes it as a massive cognitive load. They aren't lifting wood, they are bracing their central nervous systems against a century of structural silence.
Bracing against the silence. Wow.
Yeah, the physical exertion comes from holding the memory of that child so fiercely, with such absolute unwavering concentration, that the attention itself manifests as mass. If their minds wander for even a millisecond, the connection drops.
So Micah brings a highly specialized team down to that southwestern corner of the basement. He brings an archivist named Solomon Vance and a Catholic pastor in her 80s named Sister Immaculata. Sister Immaculata kneels on the concrete and begins to pray the Hail Mary out loud in Spanish. She is providing the exact acoustic counterfrequency to the silence.
Doing what couldn't be done back then.
Exactly. She is giving Luisa the formal, communal rights that her parents were denied the ability to give her in 1871. Micah places his hands on the concrete, sinking his body with the density, and he finally speaks Luisa's name aloud to the room. Because Ren brought the name in, Micah can speak it.
And the reaction is instantaneous. The building finally feels seen. The tectonic pressure begins to crack.
Okay, stop right there.
Yeah.
Because I hear this, and the imagery is beautiful, but part of me is deeply skeptical.
Skeptical how?
I have to push back on what this actually accomplishes. You're telling me that a historian finding a name on a piece of paper and a priest saying a prayer in a basement 150 years later magically fixes the fact that a marginalized child was buried in the dirt.
That's a fair point.
It feels a little, too neat. It doesn't undo the trauma that family suffered.
This raises an important question, and it's a tension the authors explicitly address. You are absolutely right. It does not fix it. The injustice of 1871 is permanent. The trauma cannot be retroactively erased.
Right.
But what the ritual does, what the sustained attention achieves, is shift the grief from being unacknowledged to being received.
Received. Okay, explain the difference there.
Think of unacknowledged grief like a sound wave bouncing infinitely around a sealed metal box. It just builds pressure and chaos with nowhere to go. Receiving the grief is like opening a window in that box. You aren't erasing the sound, but you're finally giving it a place to land. Sister Immaculata says it explicitly in the text. She cannot give Luisa what she needed then, but she can give her the recognition that the omission was wrong.
Wow.
Yeah, acknowledgement is the difference between trauma that demands to be felt by everyone who walks past it and trauma that can finally rest.
That distinction between fixing and receiving changes everything. Because once they witness Luisa, the wave finally hits the shore.
It does.
And the immediate physical result is seen when they go to lift Ren Solano's body from the hallway. Ren was a grown man, but when Micah's team lifts him, his passage feels practically weightless. He successfully set down his massive burden.
He delivered the name to the fault line.
Yes, and as they carry Ren out the front doors, Micah literally feels the Alvarado building breathe out. It drops its defenses, it stops projecting its gravity outward to trap people, and it turns its attention inward, finally able to process its own foundation.
And the structural integrity of that resolution is cemented by Solomon Vance, the archivist. Once they are out, he officially opens a permanent case file for Luisa Carrera. He writes her name, along with Domingo and Esperanza, into the Guild's immutable record.
Case LC 1871.
Exactly. The authors are making a powerful argument here. The archive isn't just dry, bureaucratic paperwork. The record is how the witness thing persists. It is the physical anchor that proves someone lived, that their pain mattered, and that their ending was accounted for.
So what does this all mean for you? The listener sitting in traffic or washing dishes or walking down a city block right now.
It's a great question.
The Pallbearers Guild is a fantasy, yes, but the mechanics it describes map perfectly onto our reality. We all move through the world walking over the hyperdense, unrecorded griefs of history.
Constantly.
Every street we drive down, every building we work in, is situated on land that holds the weight of countless unrecorded passages, injustices, and sorrows.
And it demands that we interrogate our own personal architecture, too. Like Elias Voss, we are often building our present lives on top of foundations we don't fully understand.
Yeah.
We overcompensate in our relationships or our careers, trying to build a perfect structure to hide a void we haven't acknowledged. Because as the Alvarado building demonstrates, grief that is buried without a name doesn't just disappear.
It resonates.
Exactly. It builds gravity. It waits patiently for someone to finally pay attention.
Which leaves us with a final, lingering thought to chew on. If our own unresolved, unacknowledged grief has a literal physical weight, a residual density that leaks into the environment around us, what kind of invisible structures are we inadvertently forcing the next generation to build their lives on top of?
It's a sobering thought.
It really is. If we refuse to acknowledge our own fault lines, whose foundation are we destabilizing?
That is the ultimate cost of uncarried weight. Eventually, if you don't process it, someone else has to pick it up.
So the next time you walk into a room that feels inexplicably heavy, or you find yourself reacting to a sorrow you can't quite trace back to an origin, take a moment. Pay attention to the literal and metaphorical ground you stand on. Because you never know whose unresolved history you might be walking over, waiting for its gravitational communion. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.